Yes, people, it's LokiMan07 back with another video, and this video, this video right here is a necessity, okay? Because where do I start? All right, I made a video a while ago, okay? Just after I completed Final Fantasy 7 Remake, called "The Real Reason Why the Final Fantasy 7 Remake ending sucks." And I said it be the last video I do on the subject and disappeared. But the people, okay, the people have brought me back, okay? Listen, guys, listen. Since Final Fantasy 7 Remake has dropped and all the dust has settled, the Final Fantasy 7 fanbase has completely retconned the storyline, okay? Now, I don't mean the storyline of the actual game itself. No. I mean the storyline of the video game and its production. That has been compromised. Obviously, people like the game, okay? And I'm going to show you some examples of the fan base and the things that they are saying to defend Square's choices. Now, I'm going to show you today, okay, that for the past 15 years, Square Enix, the development teams that have been making Final Fantasy games, have not been developing Final Fantasy games, okay? What they've been doing is somebody starts developing, whether it's in-house, okay? Right? Somebody starts creating a Final Fantasy game. That game never comes out, okay? And even if it's the same game with the same, it could be Final Fantasy 13, right? Final Fantasy 13 came out. Final Fantasy 13 that came out was not the Final Fantasy 13 that they started, right? Final Fantasies for the last few decades have been, the development teams have been fixers, okay? They haven't been just going through development and getting the goal they want down. That's not happening. What's happening, they start something, they start this idea that is Final Fantasy, and all of these people, right? Sorry, in fact, before I go on, I'll finish that later. Let's continue. They start a project, okay? It's a Final Fantasy game. It goes through development hell, guaranteed. Whatever the vision is, they can never get that out on a machine. And then they have the fixers that happen. And the fixers literally work within the confines of time limit, because it's like, yo, we gotta get this game out now, otherwise money is lost, okay? It's being lost. So you get, that is the product you get. And then the Final Fantasy fan base act like the product that they got was a work of complete genius, complete and utter genius, like everything was planned. So I'm going to explain it to you today. I'm going to actually show you today. I'm going to use journalism to show you today that no, stop it. Okay? I'm going to fix the Final Fantasy 7 Remake timeline on Earth. Let's go. People. To start off, we have to start at the beginning of the development of Final Fantasy 7 Remake, okay? The game is called Final Fantasy VII Remake. We were told we were going to get a remake of the Final Fantasy VII game. Hold your fingers for the dislike button, okay? Right? Okay? This isn't about getting the original game, okay? This is about the plans of Square Enix. This is not about the fans or the old fans. It's about what is happening in reality, okay? Press dislike later, okay? Watch the video, okay? Listen. Starts out development. We are getting the Final Fantasy VII game remade, okay? That's the plan. That's the original plan, okay? Get that in your head for a second. Now let's go. The game is announced, okay? We're told exactly what it is, okay? CyberConnect 2 will be partnering with Square to help them to assist with the visual concepts, okay, and all sorts, okay, just general artistic development and production, okay. Now, if you haven't watched my video called The Real Reason Why Final Fantasy VII Remake Sucks, please watch, okay? It will help you with this video, right? Don't worry, okay? It's not about how the ending sucks. It's about the history of the Final Fantasy games and why this game has been changed, okay? It's not a rant about it being Sephiroth's New Game Plus. It's how, as a development team, this had to be the cause of action. They had to do this, right? And what I'm about to say will buff that for you, okay? Why this needed to happen, right? So let's continue. CyberConnect 2, alright? They're supposed to help with the game, right? Let's check this stuff out. People, this is April of 2018, okay? News that CyberConnect 2 had been dropped from the Final Fantasy VII project had already happened, okay? As you can see, Square Enix and abandoned all CyberConnect 2's work on Final Fantasy VII Remake and started fresh. So this is where it begins, okay? This is where, right, when that happened, this is where there's no more Final Fantasy VII Remake, right? What we originally thought was going to happen was the original concept, a remake of Final Fantasy VII. If you watch my video that as explained earlier, right, I talk about how the artistic vision always gets in the way of what Square have to put out, because the artistic vision is always off. Let's read this. We're all very excited that the Final Fantasy VII Remake development is moving ahead. When it was first announced at E3 2015, it was like Christmas had come early, but Christmas is starting to seem like it may never come. The Final Fantasy VII Remake development cycle seems to be taking an inordinate amount of time. Everything we've heard from Square Enix suggests that this is not a simple remaster, but an entire remake, and that it's going to be a very different game. However, the lack of information we've received and the time between announcements is starting to suggest that things aren't going rosy. Now, there are reports that Final Fantasy VII Remake development has been troubled, maybe even involving a complete abandonment of all work at one point. Do you get that, people? A complete abandonment of all works at one point. Okay? This is where you no longer get your Final Fantasy VII Remake. They're not geniuses, okay? They're not geniuses. They never sat down at a round table at the beginning of production of this game and come up with this Sephiroth New Game Plus storyline. That, okay? The reason why there's a lot of people that say that stuff sucks is because it sucks, not because they don't want anything new in the Final Fantasy VII remake game. No way. Nobody's thinking like this. What we're saying is that the direction that Square Enix has gone kind of sucks, right? And I'll get into that later. Let's stay on subject. I'm going to explain how artistic vision first can be so out of whack you're instantly in development hell, right? Just from artistic vision. And this has happened with every single Final Fantasy game since the HD era. Even Final Fantasy 14, okay? It's insane, right? Every single Final Fantasy game since the HD era has needed fixing during its development time. It's not just being developed, and the original idea, right, is never what you get, because the original idea is always impossible, okay? Right? It's actually impossible, right? So, if you want an example, go and look at Final Fantasy Versus 13, which was supposed to be a PlayStation 3 game, okay? They couldn't get that to happen on a PS4. Project Athia looks closer to Final Fantasy Versus 13 than Final Fantasy 15 does, and that's a PS5 game, okay? So that's where this artistic vision can get you in development hell. When they released the first trailer, partnered with CyberConnect 2, and I saw the graphical fidelity, the first thing I thought was, this game is going to suck, right? Because you cannot make a game that looks like that. No way. And then get gameplay out of it. It's going to be a problem, right? It's like the system cannot do this. Like, where are you going? Okay? So when CyberConnect 2 was trying to make a game like a Final Fantasy VII remake, right, a whole Final Fantasy VII remake game, they got stuck at Midgar, bro. Let me tell ya. It's like, yo, what we gonna do? I guarantee you that is what happened. Development hell, instantly. We cannot do all this on a PS4. Where are you going? Now, people, whenever a company gives out statements on things, they're going to give you it in the sweetest way possible. They're not going to say to you, yo, we're struggling, okay? Yo, we think we said too much, we're going to have to go back and all that. They'll never do that, okay? They've got to keep your favor, okay? They're trying to sell you something, okay? And this isn't about evil corporations or anything like that. It's got nothing to do with that. It's about common sense. Somebody's trying to sell you something, right? They're not going to tell you the hardship about getting it done. They're going to act like they're experts. This is what they do. Get me? Come again, buy more. All right. So I'll explain why I'm saying that. Right. Once again, I'm going to refer back to this video. Okay. This the real reason why the Final Fantasy ending sucks video is because in that video I say that the reason, the big bad wolf, the reason why Final Fantasy VII had to be changed is because Square Enix are afraid of what happens when you step out of Midgar, which is the game opens up. Okay, Square Enix as a development team have been struggling with the opening up of Final Fantasy games since they became fully 3D, right? Straight away, instant problems. I explain all this in the previous video, okay? Let me tell ya, I wasn't talking rubbish. I can show you evidence right now. Square backing me up, telling me, yo, because I'll explain to you this. The only reason why this game became Midgar only and they wanted to expand Midgar so much is because they knew that the the artistic vision of the game, literally the art style, it requires too many textures, okay, to then start making an open world on top of it. How many discs we're gonna have? You get me? It's impossible. The art style limits the game, and then on top of that, they don't know how to make open world games correctly yet. They can't get that world map appeal to scale in this art style. Okay, it's just not gonna happen, right? Like I said, hopefully, the new technology will help them with their confidence with this. But this is an issue. I can show you that it's an issue. Let's go. Okay, so I watched the Night Sky Prince. Okay, why not? Like, it's the Night Sky Prince, right? I'm not here to promote the Night Sky Prince. The Night Sky Prince is doing well on his own. Okay, I've only got 500 subs, so my goal isn't to support the Night Sky Prince. But one thing, the reason why I respect the Night Sky Prince, because that guy is a Final Fantasy fan, okay? But he keeps it 100. Let me tell you, 100, okay? And he still keeps it 100 in a positive way, okay? All right. So check out the Night Sky Prince. Anyway, the reason why I bring up the Night Sky Prince is because he made a video very shortly after the release of Final Fantasy VII Remake. It was like a month later or so, okay, when the developers started to talk about Game 2 of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, okay, and okay, so remember, like I said, Square Enix are afraid. This is my quote: Square Enix are afraid of the openness of Final Fantasy VII, and that is why, to get out of it, okay, they decided to rewrite the story so they don't have to deal with certain themes, certain concepts, and certain visualization, okay, because now they have free reins to do whatever they want to do, and you can't say anything because it's a brand new game set in a different universe, part of the collection of Final Fantasy spin-off games, okay. Option select. So I'm going to play an audio clip of the Night Sky Prince reading an article about plans for Game 2 and the issues Square have to deal with in making this Game 2, right? And just bear in mind that my whole thing I've been saying since I've been talking about Final Fantasy VII before it even came out is that the world map system is going, like, the point, I was saying this before I even played the game, okay, that Square Enix are going to have to change a lot, right, to accommodate for the structure of Final Fantasy VII. You know, this whole flying around the world in an airship thing, right? That's a massive issue, okay? A massive issue. How are you going to do that, right? How is that happening, right? Let's go.
The interview then continues with them being asked, quote, how will the remake reimagine the world map from the original game? Hamaguchi. Yes, that's also something we have to consider. For the first installment of the remake, the concept was to have the player experience the events within Midgar, and we would like to have the next game allow the player to experience the vast world of FF7. However, if we are to create a large world, we have to consider how exactly we can do so while telling a dramatic story. Considering that Toriyama and Hamaguchi were both the leads on Final Fantasy XIII, I'm not terribly surprised that their philosophy believes that a big open world and a very dramatic story are opposed from each other.
Look, the reason why I'm bringing this stuff up, okay, It's to show, not only to just show what's going on with the game, but to show Square Enix and Final Fantasy fans, right, the truth, okay? Because I've not seen a fan base in a while, besides the Xbox fan base, which is insane right now, what's going on with them. But just to be in denial, right? Just to be making stuff up, okay? Just sugarcoating everything because they're such a fan, right? The comment sections on I've engaged in a few comment sections just expressing my opinion, and the reaction of people is insane. It's actually Final Fantasy 15 that inspired me to make this video, a conversation about Final Fantasy 15, which I couldn't believe. Like, it was insane, okay? But the point is this: people talk about what old fans expect of a Final Fantasy game and what Final Fantasy games are now. Let me tell you something, Final Fantasy fans. Every time Square Enix has gone into into development of a Final Fantasy game, they have had all intention, every single intention in the world to make these Final Fantasy games have all of as many classic Final Fantasy tropes as they possibly can. They would love to have Square Enix themselves, the developers that care about the product, would love to make a Final Fantasy game, right, have as much story beats, character development, and all the things that made the old Final Fantasy games great in looking how Final Fantasy games look now, right? And you can tell by this game right here, Final Fantasy 7 Remake, because that is what their aim was, okay? Right? And even with games like Final Fantasy 15, they tried to pack as many of that stuff in as possible. They're always going with the best intentions. So when the fans say that you know, the true fans, not the fans that just eat up anything, the fans that want Final Fantasy to be great again, when they see that they fail at doing that stuff, right? It's not because Square have branched off in different ways and they want to do things differently. It's because they're patching something. They can't get that stuff out. The artistic vision does not match the tools they're using, and it becomes a massive issue. So it's not because we don't get the intricacies of the genius, or we don't like to play a game in our heads after the experience of the game, because this is a massive problem, right? This is the Kingdom Hearts aspect, okay? I don't want to look. Nothing personal, guys, right? But the Kingdom Hearts fan base spend more time, right, playing the game in their head, okay, than actually playing the physical copy of the game. All of this guessing and things that exist outside of the game isn't what makes a video game fun. It's how you know, it's how this story is presented to you within the game, okay? Good writing, right, is just good writing, right? It makes you want to get invested in the things you don't understand, right? Convoluted is not a bad thing, okay? Convoluted only becomes a bad thing when the presentation is poor, when it's not giving you the convoluted correctly. For example, Yu Yevon is a convoluted concept, right? If you're a Final Fantasy fan, you know what Yu Yevon is from the Final Fantasy X game, right? That's convoluted, correct, right? The difference between Yu Yevon and the Arbiters of Fate is that Yu Yevon's got a whole story, like it's a whole full fleshed out entity, okay? And he's a paradox. Like the Yu Yevon character is a physical paradox, and yeah, that's convoluted, but the game explains it to you well. It's done well, okay? Right? So don't think that old fans, right, are too stupid to clock on to this whole multiple dimension thing. It's not that. It's just that it's poorly done, okay? And this thing about being a true fan and wanting Final Fantasy to be great again, I think Final Fantasy VII Remake is a good game. Yeah, and I'm saying all of this because I want Final Fantasy to be great, okay? That's a true fan. Let's see, like, this is the last piece, right, before I finish this video. We're going to see how a Final Fantasy fan, all good intentions, nothing bad in their heart, like, it's just a general conversation on YouTube, right? But check out the danger of this mentality. Check this out. Short few days ago, Night Sky Prince dropped a video talking about the sales numbers comparison between Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VII Remake, of course, and Final Fantasy 15. Now remember, guys, Final Fantasy 15 was supposed to be the game, right, that took Final Fantasy back to being Final Fantasy. Open world, or at least an illusion of an open world, at least. Vehicles, airships, chocobos, freedom of movement. Get me? An epic storyline to boot. It was all promised. The media was giving that game all sorts of tens and things, just like Kingdom Hearts 3, okay? All sorts of tens and stuff like that. I thought that Final Fantasy 15 was the game that was, going to bring me back to the Final Fantasy series. It was, in fact, it turned out to be the opposite. It was, I didn't want to buy another Final Fantasy game again. Okay, after that game, I was like, okay, that's it. It's over, right? That it was terrible to me. Okay, right. Okay. Alright, so I'm one of the people that fell victim to the damage that the Final Fantasy 15 did to the Final Fantasy brand, okay? Because it was shocking, okay? I expressed this a little in the comment section on this Night Skies Prince video, explaining the disparity between the sales numbers of 7, right? Because remember, this is Final Fantasy 7. And you could tell when the game was leading up to launch that this trust that Square Enix has is shaky, right? The trust is off, right? So here's me in the comment section. The Final Fantasy name was damaged by 15. It was really, really bad. I know it has its fans, but as an actual RPG, it's terrible. Story was hidden behind a paywall. One of the worst Final Fantasy games in my opinion ever. But 7 Remake was actually a great and complete experience. That's me saying so. Okay. Alright, then here's the response. This is Madison FF Girl. Okay. It was a really, really good. It was really, really good. My second fave, FF after 7, moving 6th to 3rd. Long time FF fan, by the way, been playing since Final Fantasy in 1990. Final Fantasy 15 isn't a bad game. It has its flaws, sure, just like any game does. It just wasn't what you were looking for in a Final Fantasy title, which is why I love Final Fantasy. They're all so different. I don't think Final Fantasy 15 was what Square Enix was looking for in a Final Fantasy title. to be fair, let alone me. Okay, like, the game is literally artistic vision versus the tools you have, the video game. Okay, it's like that conflict there, the entire game. Okay, it's one of the few games where I can say, if you like that game, your opinion is wrong. Okay, and it's not because the game is completely bad from head to toe. It's just that, as somebody who purchased an RPG, right, you shouldn't have major characters go absolutely nowhere and think that is fine and like, yeah, that's a great game. You shouldn't have entire story beats missing, right, and then have the character react emotionally, like proper acting, but you as the observer have no clue as to what, you have no connections to the things that this character is reacting to. That is bad writing, that is bad presentation. Yeah, like, sometimes we can like things that are bad, okay, like we can like crappy movies, we can like crappy games, but you still have to understand that I like this crappy game. Like, Final Fantasy 15 is not good. Like, it's not good for gaming in general. Everything about it is just not good for, it's terrible. It's not good for video games. Let's get back to this Ozia guy, okay? Right, look, I'll have to do a voice for this one. It's funny when people parrot this opinion over and over again, yet from what I've seen, Final Fantasy 15 has actually caused people to go back and check out other games in the series in droves. Final Fantasy 15 retroactively boosted the series back into mainstream popularity, whereas it has been slowly dying before. Excuse me, what? I think he's just making that up. The thing that, well, remember what I said earlier? Final Fantasy 15 was marketed as the Final Fantasy game that was going to go back to Final Fantasy roots, okay? Right? Like, it even had like a flying vehicle in it, okay? All of that was in the promotion. That got people back to Final Fantasy. Like, it got people to buy the game. I was not going to buy another Final Fantasy if it was going to be something like Final Fantasy 13, and the promotion for Final Fantasy 15 got me hooked. And when I played the game, I was so disappointed. Okay, that is my personal opinion, I know, but the things that I don't like about Final Fantasy 15 aren't based on opinion. Anyway, this guy is just a typical fan, just fixing things. Okay, I'm going to fix this so it's better for me and the thing that I like, right? But let's continue, right? Okay, guys, so I respond, okay? I respect you guys' opinions, I promise. But me, personally, no way. Whole chunks of story missing, characters dying off screen. Come on, guys, come on. Need I continue? Main characters that go nowhere, the Leviathan fight, and so much more. Main thing, story in an RPG, hidden behind a paywall. These things aren't good for gaming, let alone Final Fantasy. Okay. And this Madison FF girl comes back again. She goes, I personally enjoyed Final Fantasy 15. Yeah, I guess having to watch the movies, anime, and play the DLC to get the full story sucks. But for a die-hard fan such as myself, I was going to watch / get all no matter what. So for me, it all worked. because it felt like a complete experience. I can understand people who just played the game might not feel that way, and no DLC, so I can get how those people might not like the story at least, but the gameplay is still solid and fun with a lot of things to do. Still, like I said, I loved the story. So I respond directly to this Madison girl. I said, I hope this doesn't offend, because this has been a pretty chill conversation, but this is how fan bases kill an IP. I'm a Final Fantasy fan, but I became one because I'm a video game fan first. So I became a fan of it because it's good quality gaming. I will not be blind to quality of integrity. I definitely won't be robbed of for my loyalty and enjoy the ride. We as fans must demand better to receive better. That's all I'm saying. See, this whole outlook of I enjoy the game, so you should enjoy the game. Therefore, it's a good game, right? It doesn't wash, okay? We can be fans of anything, right? And that by default, right? Unless you're really on this stuff, it's going to make you blind to things anyway. We must accept that, okay? Right? So you was enjoying all of the character design and all these little selfish things that you particularly like about Final Fantasy 15, but in reality, what we got was an inferior Final Fantasy product that needed a lot of work after launch, that Square Enix knew wasn't enough content. They had to patch story in for free. They also had to subsidize fixing the game by selling DLC. So like I said, I don't even think Final Fantasy 15 is the Final Fantasy video game that even Square Enix themselves wanted, okay? This is not about my personal opinion. I don't think most of the backlash that Final Fantasy gets, okay, is people's personal opinion. Alright, it's not that they don't want you to have Final Fantasy fun. It's that there are problems when creating these games, and these problems can be easily avoided by just relaxing and accepting that Final Fantasy, the franchise, isn't Advent Children. It is a series of video games that were conceptualized way before Advent Children, right? And it doesn't matter if you draw from that instead of Advent Children. You want to know how Square Enix could fix Final Fantasy 7, the problem they have with the second part of the remake, right? Easy fix, right? Okay, you can make all of the areas as detailed as you want as well, right? Check this out. Just make the world map that's not to scale. Yeah? Suspend belief, okay, for a split second, and just use what brought you to the dance. Trust me, it would work, okay? I know it sounds crazy. I played Ni no Kuni. I know it's a cartoony game, right? But that world map even breaks that game's art style, and it still works, okay? It's a great game. Don't be scared. Look, guys, Madison came back with me at me with some paragraphs about Star Wars and all sorts of things, and I think it's to do with the SJW paradigm. That's got nothing to do with Final Fantasy or art. Okay, so I just rage quit the conversation, like, because to keep things respectful, sometimes it's better not to give people the truth, because sometimes the truth itself is just disrespectful. This person, Madison, was very respectful. There's nothing wrong with the conversation. She was just giving me her opinion, and I'm using her here as an example of the Final Fantasy fan base. What is important is Mr. Solid Illusion at the bottom, because Solid Illusion represents somebody who's not thinking like her, right? This is the people that we need to make Final Fantasy successful, and the things that will rope people like him in is everybody knows that it's a good game. You can't argue, just like Final Fantasy was back in the day. It's a good game. Can't tell me nothing. You can't argue. It's good. Okay. So Starry Illusion says, yeah, after hearing you have to do all that shit to get full story, I hard pass on 15 LOL. I didn't want to have to watch a movie or or anime or pay DLC, etc. I mean, that's not a good deal, okay? That's not a good deal for a story-based game, okay? This is not Destiny, okay? This isn't whatever game. You get me? An EA game. Pick an EA game. Alright, it's not it shouldn't have a pay-to-play element. It's a story-based RPG. That's single player. Yeah, what's happening here? Okay. So yeah. I'm gonna end this video. Okay. I'm gonna end this video now because I've been waffling for a while. It's going on for quite a while. I don't think I need to say any more, right? All I'm saying is that the fan base need to wake up to what's happening and stop trying to shout everyone down that has real concern and real voice. This has been a reality check, okay? This is Loki Man 07. Like and subscribe, like and subscribe.